Welcome to another episode of Inspire People, Impact Lives. I'm your host, Josh Kosnick, managing partner of Northwestern Mutual here in Madison, Wisconsin. And I get to talk to another Wisconsin native today, and Sara Schulting-Kranz. Before I introduce, I should say, I'll give you a little intro and let you introduce yourself. How about that, Sara?
I love it. First
All
of
right.
all, I'm so excited to be on with my Madison peeps. This is so cool. You have no idea. Like literally, I'm jamming right now. This is so cool.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about, because my brother's a California guy now as well, so we can talk about that. But Sara is a life coach, motivational speaker, and certified wilderness guide. I would add like certified wilderness badass. I don't know. Like the guide is pretty cool though too. She was recently featured as a TEDx speaker, on a TEDx talk, and now author of her new book releasing next week, Walk Through This. So she has an inspiring story of healing and forgiveness and a message of a path forward for those who have suffered on some major trauma or setbacks in their life, which I think most of us can attest to and relate to. So Sara, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on. I'm really, really honored to be here with you.
I really want to thank you for coming on, and our mutual friend Darcy Luoma for hooking us up, because really excited to get into your story and our listeners to hear everything that you have to say and the advice that you might give them. So before we get into it, tell us a little bit about yourself.
A little bit about myself. Well, first of all, I was born and raised in Black Earth, Wisconsin. Yeah, I know. Isn't that great? And so I'm a small town girl at heart and now live out here in California by the beach. I'll give you kind of like, do you want me to just like dive straight into my jam past? Is that what you would like?
Well, I was going to think that before we dive right in, like tell us a little bit about growing up Black Earth. When did you transition out to California? And then we'll go into some of the main bulk of your story.
Yeah, I mean, born and raised there. I actually went to UW to Madison. I graduated from Madison in 95. I was an art major, and I actually was also a young mom through that time. So I had a child at the age of 17, and we'll go back into that. So I really went straight into college, but also lived at home still in Black Earth. And, it was a really trying time in my life, but it set me up for everything where I'm at today, leading a very inspiring, I do have to say, like, I'm inspired every day. And a very creative life, and formed a business from that standpoint, complete creativity. And and so just being born and raised back in Wisconsin helped give me that foundation for who I am today, even though I'm living out here in California and there's so much unrest that's happening around me right now. It just really gave me a great foundation and set me up for where I'm at. I had a second trauma at the age of 40 that really was paralyzing, I guess I could say. Lots of PTSD within me, and really did a lot of healing through that as well. And I will tell you that the premise of my book, it's called Walk Through This, Harness the Healing Power of Nature and Travel the Road to Forgiveness. It truly stemmed from what I learned when I was born and raised in this small village of Black Earth, Wisconsin. And I knew at the age of 18, I remember where I was driving home from Madison as a student. And I had this hit, and you can call it from God, whatever you want, that my story, because I was living in such a traumatizing even state back then, but yet, going to school and everything, I knew at that stage, even at 18, that my life was going to be put into a book someday. I could never quite figure out why it didn't happen until I had my trauma at 40 and realized my story was not finished, and I couldn't write it yet because I still had to live through so much more before that story could get out there. And so here we are today. Thank you, Midwest.
And those Midwest values that we hear about all the time that carry with us. I grew up in the Midwest. Now I have a brother and sister that are out west, one in Redondo Beach, and then my sister's in Denver. And so, those values, they speak to it, and Jake will speak to it every time he comes back about how he misses the Midwest nice. I think
you realize that I'm like 2 miles from Redondo Beach.
No, I didn't.
I'm in Hermosa. I'm in Redondo Beach all the time, paddling. So I'm out of the harbor. So I may have passed across with. I mean, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, that is good. So you mentioned and alluded to a part of your story, and you've lived through some serious traumatic events in your life. Let's first talk about the first event at 17, and then
Mhm.
we'll progress through that story because it's a really good foundational story you already alluded to a little bit.
Yeah. So at 17, I was raped by somebody that I knew, and I tried to press charges on this person, and the police refused to press charges. I actually ended up getting pregnant as a result, and chose to keep my son. I chose to birth him and keep him. And I want to be very clear with something here. Okay. So a lot happened back then in terms of society, in terms of the way that I was judged and shamed, and I worked through my process of forgiveness. And so I'm releasing all of that. So I have released all of that. So when I talk about this, I don't want people to judge the people of, the police department back then, even the people within my town back then, because a lot of people didn't believe me. Most of the people didn't believe me. And why didn't they believe me? They didn't believe me because the police didn't believe me. And so it was a really trying time in my life because here I am, 17 years old, made the choice to still keep my birth, not only birth my son, but keep my son.
Yeah.
And I talk a lot about that in the book. And even, I mean, there was a lot that happened in terms of people wanting to take him from me. And it was really difficult. And it taught me so much about myself. And that's where I always talk to people about traumatic things happen in your life. And it's not about allowing them to define you. It's about learning from them so that you can overcome and become a better person as a result. So my mom, like she was my saving grace. My parents, they were amazing. They gave me the power of choice back then. And I chose to still go through with this, with birthing this child and taking him home with me. And I mean, I took him to classes at Madison. I had the most amazing professors that knew. I mean, I went and told them about this. Like, I had to have some really tough conversations with them and say, look, I'm a young mom. I'm waiting tables out in Sauk City, right? And like hosting and waiting tables. I'm trying to do the best that I can in terms of balancing my life and get the education that I want in order to create a better life. And I need you guys. And the professors at Madison were amazing and allowed me to bring him in. And, it was just, I found the people who could support me and love me during that time. My mom used to walk me down Main Street in Black Earth, and she would say to me, because I would cry and I'd say, I don't know what to do. Like, people aren't believing me. And she would say, just hold your head high, take one step at a time. You're going to get through this, walk through this. Someday people will believe you. And she was amazing. She was amazing. That's actually how we came up with the name for this book. And we have a documentary in production out of that. And it was, the most powerful thing was learning the lesson that the number one person that you have to believe in is yourself. And that's it. The most important relationship that you can have in life is with yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a difficult time in my life.
Well, first so sorry that that happened. And as a dad to three girls, like, well, how did your dad react?
Mm. So I'm going to be completely honest with you on this, obviously, because that's all I am. My dad did not take it too well, and neither did my brothers, because I have two brothers. One's a year older than me, and one's 2 years older than me. And there were a couple of guys around town too that didn't take it too well. And I found out some things later that, where they were protecting me behind the scenes. And my dad, it's interesting, when I chose to bring my son home, I didn't tell anybody that I was going to keep him. I just knew that it wasn't the right time to have that conversation because we were all having our own healing journey. I had to get a restraining order on this guy. Like, it was bad, and they were having to protect me through it. And yet, again, like, people don't believe you. So it's not only me going through this traumatic experience, it's my family.
Mm-hmm.
And we're very close. Like, my family is very, very close. And he couldn't hold my son for quite a while. And I didn't even know that until we did the documentary, and I found out about that. And my mom and I had some conversations about it. I was like, I had no idea. I didn't even realize. I mean, I was in a state for that first probably 6 months of bringing him home, of just trying to balance everything and going to college and doing all the things. I had no idea. So I actually lived at home for, like I said, for those 4 years of college. And yet, my dad's an amazing, a loving human being. And I think it's really done a number on him to better understand himself as a man and as a protector, and my brothers as well. Like, I can't, it brought our family closer together. I mean, that's how we're like, we are tight. And so at the same time, it's also been really hard. Like we've gone through some hard times together.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but from your dad's standpoint, I would assume that he couldn't hold your son because he was a part of the person that hurt his baby girl.
Right. Right. I believe so. I don't know. It's interesting. We haven't quite had that conversation because I literally just found out about this not too long ago. But I believe so. That's what I believe. Now I'll tell you something. My son, my 29-year-old is like the center of attention. Like he and my parents could not be more close. Like they are another set of parents to him, which has been the most unbelievable gift, right? Like my dad and mom love him. And so, and he's the firstborn, obviously, of my family. And I have two more sons, and the cousins and everybody, like they look up to him like he is, a mentor. And so it's really interesting. I think that when we can view people through the lens of love in place of judgment and where they came from, it just transforms everything. And that is exactly what this has gifted us with.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, because obviously your son, couldn't help how he came into this world, but he became this amazing, human being that you raised, and this amazing blessing to your family.
Yeah. And that's exactly why you nailed on why I chose to keep him, because I write about that. I had this internal knowing that this child was to be on this earth for a reason. And it wasn't about how it happened, right? Like I could differentiate between the two. And I knew that there was this instinct within me, this feeling, this mothering feeling that even at 17 years old, that he had to be here. And I could detach from that whole experience and protect him in a way that, people didn't even know I was protecting him. People didn't even realize, like, oh yeah, I'm making this choice to bring him home. And it wasn't until the hospital where they ended up telling me that there was a foster family waiting for him, and I didn't even know it. Like there was a lot of stuff that went down that you can read about in the book, but and I had to fight for him. So
What we didn't talk about this, but did you grow up in a religious family? Like, did that play a part of it?
Full-blown Catholic, my friend. However, that full-blown Catholicism is not why I kept him. And I'll tell you as well that, and I talk about that too in there, there were many things that happened within my Catholic religion that should never have happened to me. And I don't go fully into detail in the book just because it would have ended up being like a 1,000-page book if I went into everything, right? And I do talk about it in the film though. And yeah, but my parents, they said, you know what, regardless of, like, this needs to be your choice. We're not going to tell you what to do. And so they sat me down on their bed and they were like, you can make the decision one way or another. What do you want to do? We're not going to tell you what to do because this is your body. And I give them so much respect for that, because had they have forced me to make the decision, if they would have made that decision for me, I truly don't believe that it would have been a resonant choice for myself to become the mom that I am today.
Yeah, no, that's so good. So what advice, so first of all, I want to make a disclaimer that as a man, I'm in no position to speak on this topic, but abortion is such a, just taboo topic, right? So you chose not that path. You chose to keep your son and raise your son. And what advice would you give to someone that maybe is struggling with that decision or will struggle with that decision, as a woman to a woman that may be going through the same thing you or has gone through what you've gone through?
The biggest thing that I can tell you is to settle into your heart and start there. We are a mind-based society, right? Like we always go elsewhere for decisions. If it's Surrey, Google, therapists, coaches, mom, dad, religious, whatever. And I always tell everybody, settle into your heart, take some peace, right? And that's actually where I did a lot. This is how I got into nature, into my nature healing, is because I would go plop my butt in the cornfields, right, in Black Earth, and have these, or go walk through Black Earth Creek and have these moments of absolute peace that could allow myself to make the decision moving forward. And, you know, I will tell you that the thing that I do always, it breaks my heart, is when I hear people who are rape victims and they say, you know, how can people love their child when they know that that happened to you? When you know that that other, quote, half of them didn't come from a place of love. But here's the thing, love trumps everything.
Mhm.
Love trumps everything. Light will always take out darkness. And so when I look at my son, I don't see that he is the product of a rape. I just don't. I see him as pure love.
Yeah.
And so that gets back to that place of, if we can look at other people without judgment and through the eyes of compassion and kindness, look at how much life changes. Look at how you can see the other person from a different perspective. So that's the part that I would love people to really step back from, because I don't want people to look at my child like that, right? Like, he's an incredible man. And if you knew some of the stuff that he does, I'm just like, he blows me away. And to think that he didn't have to be here, and that the ripple effect of love wouldn't have been created, right? The goodness that he's putting into the world would not be there if I would have made the choice to not keep him. Again, though, that was my choice. And I don't judge other people for their choices. I
Yeah.
just don't. You can't walk in somebody else's shoes.
Right. Right. No, that's perfect, because there will be people that make a different choice, and that's their choice. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So moving forward, you graduate from UW, got your beautiful baby boy. You meet your ex-husband, David, right?
Yeah.
And at this point, is life starting to go, quote unquote, as planned?
Heck yeah. Because
So,
doesn't it?
yeah, right. Just goes as planned.
Makes
me,
sense.
right?
I'm a Midwest girl. There's always a plan.
Yeah. So take us through that and kind of usher us into the future and present now.
Yeah. So yeah, I met my husband on the Madison Metro bus. I mean, I was the bus girl, which is hilarious to me. Coming back from lot 60. I mean, like, do you remember those days? Is lot 60 still even there? I don't even know. I'm not even sure.
I'm pretty sure lot 60 is there, but Chris was recently at UW, so he could confirm.
It's hilarious. Yeah, I met him on the Madison Metro bus, and we fell in love like overnight. I mean, he was my best friend, and I smile as I'm saying this because we had so many good times together. And I honored him at the end of this book in the acknowledgments, because I really learned a lot from him during that time. He really truly was my best friend. We got married shortly thereafter, moved to St. Louis, moved from St. Louis back up to Milwaukee, moved to the West Coast for his work. And I was teaching, and then I quit teaching, we had 2 more sons together. And they are now, so my oldest is now 29, middle is 19, and the youngest is 14. We were married for 17 years when I found out that he had been betraying me for 14 of them with men. And I was 40 years old, and Thanksgiving Eve, 2013. So it was a devastating time in my life, obviously. Talk about like being thrown back into the trauma of your past, and the betrayals, and who can I trust, and why did this happen? And, this man who was, again, my everything, like he was my everything. And I remember the moment that he told me, we were sitting down on the couch, and and then I stood up from the couch as soon as I found out. And he told me, he said, "This is what's been going on." And I looked at him and I said, "I want a divorce, but I will forgive you someday." And here's the thing. The reason I came to that place so quickly is because, and it's my subconscious self that I knew was coming forth from my 17-year-old space. Right. And learning so much of what I did at 17 allowed me and gave me the wherewithal to get through this at the age of 40. And so I'm now 47. I went through an intense year and a half, 2 years of just about a year and a half of just intense PTSD, being thrown back into my past. And what did I do? I went into nature, and that became my healing space. got a good coach, therapist, and really dove into how this happened and how did I get here. And the reason why I dove so quickly into it is because I kept thinking about my babies back home, right? I am that protector. And, my sons are everything to me. And so I wanted to make sure that I would also be able to get healthy again so that they had the mom that they needed, quite
Yeah.
frankly, because is there, now they have to deal with, is their dad? What happened here? And so my family went through a major transformation. And again, thankful to my mom, I went back. I remember where I was when I was going for a walk one day, and I went back to that 17-year-old self and just kept saying, okay, mom taught me how to do this when I was 17. I'm going to be doing the same thing here at 40, and we're going to get through this. And, it was a lesson of even deeper understanding of myself than I ever imagined. So I will tell you, I honor this stuff that I've been through, and I don't wish it on anybody.
Yeah.
It sucked. Don't get me wrong. It sucked. But and it's really brought me to here where I am today. So
One of the things that interesting about you that just came to mind, like you grew up in this like Catholic house.
right?
And one of the things that comes to mind for me with Catholicism, so just to full disclosure, I am Christian but non-denominational. And one of the things that's always baffled me about Catholicism is the guilt and shame that come with it.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about your experiences, and I'm thinking about you growing up with that kind of Catholic guilt and shame. And how did that like manifest through this most recent situation with, I'm just trying to sit here as a man and understand a woman, right? So your husband, you find out, has been cheating on you for 14 years with other men,
hmm
while I assume sleeping with you, and you're trying
Yeah.
to try and understand, okay, he's on his own journey, but you're like, how did that make you feel as a woman? What kind of shame did that feel like?
Right.
I'm asking this, like, you do not have to answer this. I'm just
No.
speak out loud and like, and try and see where, because I know this could help someone in the future. I know that's why you do what you do.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm just trying to word vomit here. Like, how did that play out and manifest and get through that year and a half?
Well, so this is interesting that you bring this up because he was literally leading a double life. So it wasn't only the fact like he, white collar worker going to New York, and that's where most of it was happening when I was living here on the West Coast with him. And um, there's many parts to this. So I will tell you that in addition to him leading a double life, there were drugs involved, there was alcoholism, there was all sorts of stuff that I didn't know about. And yeah, I had major guilt and shame because there were so many times that I would question him on certain things. And I talk about that in there, like in the book, that I would question him on certain things and I listened to him over myself.
Mm,
Right. And so, because we in our Catholic religion also, divorce is taboo. Like you work through it, doesn't matter. You make it happen, you work it. And so that was a huge piece of understanding myself, that when my intuition is on, girl, listen to it. Right. And I now today am so intuitively aligned with my heart, my body, my soul, my spirit, that nothing really gets by me anymore, because
yeah.
every time that I had this like, wait a second, what's going on? Sure enough, my intuition was on. The betrayals were not just from him though. It was betrayals from friends. It was betrayals from, people that were selling him drugs that were also friends of mine. Like there were so many betrayals, right? That I actually had to go through one by one by one by one by one and address. What's interesting is the year prior to this, the year and the 2 year prior to this, I took my mom to Italy because she is Catholic. We're all Catholic, right? And so I took her to Italy. We went to Rome and we went to the Vatican. And I, at that point in my life, was a Catholic, like full on blown Catholic. Now I practice Catholicism. I believe in God, but I'm not like, it's not like I was, because there's just so much betrayal there. And I'm very spiritually aligned, with nature and different things as well. So I believe in a lot of different things. And what's interesting is I remember going to the Vatican and having a conversation with one of the priests, and talk about this like happening for a reason. And he said to me that you don't have to, like, what is happening within the Catholic religion is not what's actually supposed to be happening. And he said, just back off a little bit and listen to yourself more. Give yourself some grace.
Coming from a priest.
And coming from a priest in the Vatican, mind you. And I just thought, wow, he goes, we are not supposed to be looking at it with guilt and shame. That's not what our religion is actually intended. That's not how it was intended for. And I thought that was so fascinating because I was like, I remember pulling my mom over and being like, Mom, you got to hear this, right? Like, this is not what I've been taught. And I believe that message was given to me also as a reminder that you don't sit in this. There is, like, you didn't do anything wrong, girlfriend. Like, this is not yours to hold. It's yours to learn from, but it's not yours to hold.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so good. And that's so, wow. I mean, that is so divine for a priest in the Vatican to give you that advice, where I was not expecting you to go that way with that.
Well,
just based on my own assumptions and experiences with Catholicism. So, so that is pretty awesome. So I want to think about and talk about, how did you help yourself to help your boys? Because now they have, I'm assuming at that time, that was his coming out to you and probably to the world.
Yeah.
And so he's out now and he's on his journey, and he's raising 2 young boys along with you, and they have to come and accept not only their parents' divorce, but their father as a gay man. How did you navigate those waters, and what advice can you give in that respect?
So there were 3 words. So yeah, we had 3 sons at the time. There were 3 words that I dove into really deep, because let me back up really quick. When I was going through this trauma recovery in the first year and a half, where it was really intense, I would take my paddleboard. I live in Hermosa Beach, just 4 blocks off the ocean. And I would take my paddleboard and I would paddle out into the ocean, and I would be with the whales and the dolphins, and allowed myself to really get clear, right? And not let those ruminating thoughts in my head take over, but more so settle into my heart and really lead from that space. And there were 3 words that came to me when I was out there. It was truth, inspiration, and hope. And the reason I went with those words, and this is a serious lesson in listening, okay? The reason I went with those words, they just dropped into me. It was like, Sara, these are the 3 words that you need to go with, right? That you need to listen to, that you need to be with. And the reason it was truth is because it's truth. Always speak your truth. Your truth is your truth. You know, this is your story. This is not only his story, right? This is not just like he can't take you into his story without also giving you the respect of, this is your story to tell. And so that was one. And that means even being truthful with my kids. I was really truthful with my children. And when things started to go down, like, you know, he relapsed once, and I had to tell my kids straight up asked me, is he going to die? And I said, you know what? I promised you that I would never lie to you, because I know what it's like to be lied to. And I don't know, but I'm doing everything that I can so that he doesn't, because he is your father. And I have love for him. Like, for me to even say that, like, I have love for him. And I want him happy and healthy as well. He's the father of my kids. And then inspiration, to lead an inspiring day every day. And that was including for my children, and for them to step into their space outside of this and be inspired enough to become leaders in the world, which they are. My middle is playing water polo at USC. He's, you know, one of the top recruits in the nation. My youngest is this avid basketball player that wants to play in college. So I wanted them to take this experience and to become better men because of it, and to help others. And my oldest, I mean, he's doing great. And then hope, just literally having hope every day for your present and future life. And so that's how I really created that foundation with them, with them and for them, was through those 3 words. Because, you know, this could have taken them down a very dark path.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that I refused for that to happen. There was no way. Nobody was going to I'm a mama bear, like, and they all know that. My boys know that. And so there is no way I was going to let this take them down. I wanted this to lift them up, not to take them down.
So you keyed on two amazing words and the most powerful emotions in the human spirit already, in love and hope.
Mm-hmm.
And those are amazing. So your boys you speak of, like in the one that's playing at USC, like that's like I'm an athlete. I was a football athlete, but water polo in California, and especially USC, UCLA stuff, that's a big deal.
It's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And he's a really cool kid. He is a really, really cool kid on a very amazing path. Yeah. And I wanted them, I mean, my oldest is not an athlete, but he is definitely, he's very, very smart and is doing really well for himself. And my younger two are big athletes. And I knew that this could actually be what, I mean, this is going to sound crazy, but what they needed to learn from in order to become more compassionate, understanding leaders in this world that ultimately could take them to that next step with their athleticism, and who knows into what. I mean, I
Yeah,
see it because I'm their mom. They need to see it though, so which
yeah.
they do. And so it's been really good for them, actually.
And what's their relationship with their dad at this point?
Great. They're doing, they have a really good relationship. And I encourage that with them. I want them to have a good relationship with them. I think it helps my ex-husband as much as it does them. And because again, like, I don't care who you are, you deserve to live a full, like, life full of love and everything else. And to learn from your mistakes and
Yeah,
to create a better world because of it. And so I can't force anybody to do that. I can't force him to do that. I can do that myself and hope that he does the same. And ultimately, that's what I want. And so, and on behalf of his kids, I think that that's the best route for him, obviously. So
yeah. Well,
I encourage it.
I can speak to being a son and a quite immature teenager at one point, and 20-something-year-old. The life experiences and the impact that you've had in overcoming some life experiences and sharing with your children and helping them overcome, like, the emotional maturity that they will have as young males versus their peers is going to be immeasurable.
Yeah.
Just tremendous. So one of the things that you mentioned that you refer to in your book, you talk about trauma brain.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
Oh, hell sure. Did I just say that? I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. Yes. Well, what's really interesting is for the first probably, I don't know, 8, 9 months, I mean, I was ruminating and I was like full blown PTSD. I was called a codependent, co-addict, co-everything, like anything that's what I was called. So my husband at the time went to rehab. And when he went to rehab, I was kind of like left out there, right? Like, here, go home and just take care of the kids. And I was a freaking mess. I had no idea what was going on with me. And then I called, I actually asked for help. I was like, could somebody help me? I couldn't talk to anybody about what was going on. Who's going to believe me? And I already like gone through a time in my life where nobody believed me. So I called and asked for help. And Dorit Reichenthal was my coach and therapist back then. And she sat me down and she was like, what you're experiencing is trauma brain. You're not a co-addict. You're not, like, there's nothing wrong with you. And hearing that was probably the most, I mean, it just changed everything. So trauma brain is where everything from your past, right? It's this whole thinking of everything from your past that you thought was real is now not real. And so when you're having a trigger that happens, you automatically go to a place and a time in your life that made you feel alive. Well, all of the times in my life that made me feel alive were with my husband. So I would go there, except that then I'm sitting there going, okay, well, what's real and what's not? Right. And so trying to make sense of my past was so freaking hard. You talk then to you if you've have you ever read The Body Keeps a Score? If you haven't,
No.
you need to, oh my God, it's such a good book. Bessel van der Kolk talks about it. And he talks about how trauma sits in the body and how in order for us to get out of the trauma within our body, we have to feel most alive in the moment to recreate these alive moments, right? To have new alive experiences that are not based on our past, because our past right now, especially in relational betrayal trauma, doesn't make sense. And so it's interesting because Bessel van der Kolk talks about that. And I'm going somewhere with this. Richard Louv, who nature deficit disorder, which we were going to talk a little bit about, I know.
Oh, we will.
Yeah, which we will. So Richard Louv has this thought process on nature deficit disorder and how we as humans are not going out into nature enough. And we're sitting behind our screens and we're sitting in four walls. And it's really doing a negative thing within our body and brain. Yet he talks about, where do you feel most alive but out in nature? The human being is most alive when we are in nature. So here I am, okay, traumatized. My brain's ruminating. I'm not making sense of things. I am losing my memory, quite frankly. I can't eat. I would eat like an apple a day. I was losing my thoughts. I was going into these depressions of like, and I will tell you that there was one moment I actually considered suicide, where I was like, if I just take my car and smash into the side of this, all of this can go away. And it was such a devastating time in my life. And yet, what I needed to do was to get out into nature, because I needed to create more alive moments in my life that I could connect to and feel more powerful in, that I could allow the trauma to release from my cells and be that powerful woman that I once was. And so that's what I did. And through that process, my brain slowed. My trauma brain healed. It started to come back. My brain came back online, because what happens in trauma brain too is that your brain literally will go offline. You will, I ran into a light pole one day. I was like, I knew it was there, but I just ran into it because my brain and my body were not online together. And so when I would go out into nature, it would completely shift. And that's where I would get the frontal lobe of my brain would slow down. The back part of my brain, my cerebellum, would rise. And that's where I had my clarity. That's where I had my creativity and my peace moments. And that's where I could feel most alive.
Before we get into the nature talk, I just got to say, like, your strength and the work that you've done to overcome is just pretty amazing. There's been 3 separate times, I think, in this interview where I've almost cried. And we're just talking through this like very well. And part of it where I want to say here is, and I've become a little bit more public about this, but 2.5 years ago, my father-in-law took his own life and my mother-in-law found him. And so as you're talking about this trauma brain, like, I see that still in her.
Yeah.
And experience that still with her, but she has support groups and her faith, but she also doesn't have her kids to come home to. Like, we're up here and she's in Indiana and stuff like that. Like, there's different things and times she struggles, and I can still see what you're talking about in her. And that was like, just came to mind. So I'm going to talk to her about this nature.
Yeah. You know what? Have her reach out to me. Have her get my book. I'll tell you something. It's a real thing. And when I interviewed one of my colleagues about trauma brain on my own podcast, it was the most downloaded podcast that I've ever had. It doubled in downloads, because we don't talk about that. Like, we literally, the frontal lobe of our brain is maxed out right now. Yeah. And when we go through trauma, I can imagine, my heart goes out to her, because when you walk in on something like that, whether it is the loss of somebody that you love, if it is finding out that they've been betraying you, whatever it is, your mind literally it explodes. Like, all the memories, I would say it's like a card catalog, all those memories of your past, it's like they just go, right? And you go, okay, great. Now I have all these memories on the floor and I can't make any sense of them whatsoever. Did any of this really make sense to me? And for you to sit there and think, did any of my life even make sense or matter? Right. And so it is an everyday work in progress. There's a whole part in my book about this that she really should read, and so should everybody, quite frankly, because you're talking about this openly, which, thank you. And it has happened to so many people. And so I had to get to the place, even when you had to ask about my children, I had to sit them down once and say to them, because I lost it. I kept, you forget, like you literally, trauma brain makes you forget things. So one of the things that I still work on is I set something down and I will forget where I put it. And I have to remind myself, Sarah, it's okay. Have compassion for your mind. Your brain's been through a lot. And I imagine myself literally hugging my brain because it needs love as much as our heart does, and our body and everything else. And I had my kids, I remember one day they said to me, they were like, Mom, you're so forgetful. And they were getting so annoyed with me. And I lost it. And I just sat down crying with them. And I said, look, you need to understand what my brain has been through, not only my heart, but my brain. And I struggle with this. And so anything that's really hard for me, I hand it off. I mean, like, if you only knew, like, there are things where I'm like, I give this to my assistant because I can't, and they all know it. They all know this about me. Right. And they are very compassionate with me because of it. I am damn good at this, and I am damn good at facilitating, and I know how to go into nature, and I know what I'm good at, right? I know what I'm good at. The things that I struggle with, I now hand off because it's all because of what my mind's been through, right? Be compassionate with yourself about that.
And be compassionate with others, because oftentimes, like if we're in my line at Starbucks and someone unintentionally, steps on our foot or cuts in line or whatever, and we want to snap at them, maybe it's trauma brain.
Well,
maybe it's trauma. Maybe they didn't have any intention, but that person's not going to sit you down like you did with your kids.
Right.
And by the way, I'm preaching to myself here as well, because I get very frustrated in traffic and amongst other places. But bottom line is, like, we all got to preach that to ourselves, to have compassion for others, because oftentimes we're just trying to get through.
Yeah, there are many, many days. One of the things that happened to me was I got into a really bad car accident not long after all of this happened, about a year. It was actually the day after I put my brand new license plate on my car, and I smashed into the girl ahead of me, and she smashed into the guy ahead of her. And I got out of the car and I had my Uggs on and I took them off and I threw them down in the middle of the road, and I just started crying. And she said, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "No, I'm actually not. And I am really, really sorry that I did this to you. And I'm more sorry that my trauma has now affected you." And I had to tell her, I'm like, my brain went offline. I'm so sorry. And this is not my intention. I did not mean to hurt you. And I explained to her what was going on in my life. And she came over and she hugged me and she said, "I'm so sorry." She said, "It sounds like what you're going through is much larger than this car accident." Now, she sued me later on, by the way, which I was like, well, that's not cool. Thank you for that moment of caring and then suing me, and yet I'm like, well, whatever that is that she's going through, that's what she's going through. But yeah, it was difficult. It was a difficult moment.
Oh, the hug was good. The suing, not so much. But
not so much. I was like, that's not cool.
But anyhow, so let's get into the nature piece, because it's really, really powerful. What led you there? Like, was it a big epiphany? Had it been a reconnection? Was there a specific moment? Can you speak to that at all, that led you to this nature and reconnecting and grounding, as Dispenza says? Like, what led you there, and what made this so powerful for you in your healing?
Truthfully, it was what I learned at 17 out in the cornfields. When I was an art major, I would always take my my drawing assignments outside, and I would draw nature around me. And what happens is that when we focus on the beauty of life, and I mean like nature, like Mother Nature, the beauty of a tree, the beauty of a spider, that's where, like I mentioned, your frontal lobe literally slows down, and you were able to have clarity into what truly matters in this world. And so when this happened, I was just automatically drawn, like, take your paddleboard and go outside, go onto the ocean, and allow yourself to feel, and allow yourself to connect to something so much bigger than you. Because when we're traumatized, we connect to that trauma, right? We connect to what happened. We are constantly in that state of, how could he? Well, for me, it was, how could he? Or how could she, or whatever it is. And when I allowed myself to get out of that space and to be instead of do with my trauma, I allowed myself to heal. I mean, it really was a somatic healing that happened. Um, and it's not only that I would go to the ocean, I would just literally like go out into the park and stare at the clouds, because awe is one of the most amazing sensations that you can have, because it really does actually heal your own traumas. It's
AWE, right?
AWE, yeah. And so if when you can get to that place of awe and wonder for life, you realize that you are so much more than what's happened to you. I would go and climb mountains. I mean, I get it. Like, we don't have mountains in the Midwest. You do, though, have a lot there, by the way, because I lived there. And so even just, going out into and staring at Lake Mendota or Lake Monona or whatever it is, or going up Devil's Lake. Oof, that place is spiritual, by the way. There's a lot of spirituality around Devil's Lake. I did my scuba diving there. And just being able to ground yourself and just sit with what's around you. And it's such a beautiful thing to have happen. It literally doesn't take much. It's like 5 minutes a day, they found, will start to slow your mind and clear your body. So
what if I'm in that place? I'm like, yeah, sir, I feel you. I'll go do that, but I don't want to feel. Like, I want to block off feelings.
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh.
That's okay, you can laugh. I'm just sitting there thinking, like, I'm so mad right now, or I'm so hurt right now, that I don't want to feel that hurt more. So I feel what you're saying. Like, I appreciate the nature thing. I just don't want to make myself hurt anymore. I want the hurt to go away.
To heal anything, you have to feel everything. Period, point blank, done. Put that exclamation mark on it, no question mark. Like, to heal anything, you have to feel everything. You have to, because, and that's why when I take people on my retreats in the Grand Canyon, it works so well, because we go down into a canyon, right? Like, we go down in, we sit down there, just like we need to do within ourselves. We need to be with ourselves. We need to go deep into ourselves and to allow ourselves to sit in those emotions, but not stay there. That is what people think. People think, oh my God, if I feel it, I'm going to stay there. But it's not about that. It's about feeling it, addressing it, allowing it to move through you, right? And also out of you. So it doesn't mean you're going to sit in the pain forever. It doesn't mean you're going to sit in the anger forever. It's actually that place of allowing yourself to transcend from it into freedom and peace and love and all the things that we actually are deserving of. So I'm sorry to tell you, I'm not sorry to tell you, like, it's a gift. Like, it truly is a gift to feel. And so even those emotions that hurt us most, because on the other side of that is ultimate freedom and peace.
Just like on the other side of fear is what you want most.
Yeah. 1,000%. 1,000%.
So what did you say again? Let me get this quote right, because it was so good. That in order to heal it, you must fully feel it.
Yes. In order to heal anything, you have to feel everything.
That was awesome. And I agree. And it's hard.
And it's hard. Oh yeah, it's totally hard. I had a lot of emotion. I still, what's interesting is I still work on this too. So people think, oh, like, she's at this new space. Yeah, I am, but I still do this. Every year I take a trip for me. This year I was now you don't have to do this. I was on the John Muir Trail for 22 days. And only because I wanted to. You don't have to go outside for 22 days, trust me. But I still work on this every day too, where I literally get outside and I allow myself to access the emotions that I also still need to work through, and heal from. It's an everyday process.
By the way, I know you're really booked today. Do you have a hard cutoff?
No, we're good.
Okay. Perfect. Because I want to talk to you a little bit about the mental health and the nature around this year, right? So COVID happens, we get locked down. In a lot of places, you're in California, and a lot of things are still locked down, and quote unquote freedoms or things that we're used to, we can't do. I have a significant fear around people's mental health this year. I know I'm not the only one. Yep. And there's so many people that have been affected so many different ways, whether it's businesses shutting down, there's job loss. We're still dealing with other things that aren't COVID related, even though the COVID's the only thing that gets talked about right now. other illnesses, heart attacks, cancers, other things. There's so much going on in our normal lives, and then COVID happens and we're locked down and we can't experience some of the normalcy of life. How are you helping people through that? Or what advice would you give to people that are feeling like they're just not themselves because this year has not been at all normal?
Yeah. So, what's interesting is I wrote this book during COVID, which is really fascinating. The world is in a very traumatized state right now. So we always think it's just the United States. It's not. I mean, I get messages from other, people in other countries that are followers, and they're like, we're watching you and we're traumatized, just by everything that's happening. And, how I've been helping people work through it is to remind them that when you attach yourself to fear, right, you are automatically also going to be bringing forth your anxiety. You are automatically going to be bringing forth the possibility of depression and all of the things. Fear, do you know that we only have two fears in life? Did you know that? We're born with two fears in life, the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. That's it. And so everything else, we have these fears of, well, what if I get this? Well, what if this happens? What if, and I always look at it and I always view it as, how can I live my life today from an inspiring space where fear is not controlling me, right? Because here's the thing, there's so much happening around us that the most important thing that we can do is to live in peace within us. Because when we're in that space, everything else around us, it's happening, but we don't allow it to happen to us. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. The question that came to mind, and I think I know the answer, but I want to hear you say it, is do you have to be fully okay with yourself to be able to be at peace with?
No, absolutely not. I don't think anybody is ever fully okay with themselves, by the way. Like, I'm not. I mean, and I've done a lot of work on me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I still, even today, I was on an interview this morning with somebody and I was like, I'm still, there's parts of me that come up. I'm like, ooh, not okay with that. Need to look at that. Need to work on that. And that's the beauty of this, like, I wasn't taught personal development, by the way, when I was young. This was all something that was handed to me as a gift through my experiences. And I think it's one of the most important lessons that we can give to our kids is work on yourself every day, you guys. Like, come on. Yeah. And so that space of peace is something that sometimes feels like a little seed that's growing. And sometimes it feels like a huge tree within me where I'm super grounded. And I think that one of the biggest things that I can tell people is get your butt outside. Like, literally go outside. If you don't meditate, just sit, start going inward and just listen, use your senses. So our senses were given to us as gifts. So allow them to open up to the world around you. Listen to the bird, listen to the creek, listen to, the rustling of, you guys, it's fall there, right? Do you guys still have leaves coming off the trees? So listen to that, right? Listen to the breeze. Fall is gorgeous back there. Smell the scent, smell the burning, leaves that happen when, I know they did when I was living there. And, just taste the air and get to that place, that inner peace that's within every single one of us. And sometimes that can be really hard for people because their mind takes over. Allow the thoughts, just see the thoughts, like internally be like, okay, there's a thought, let it go, right? Like I always say, like, let it go with the breeze. If you listen to nature apps or not nature apps, but to meditation apps, those are really good. Go in and don't meditate inside, go outside and meditate. You'll find that you will actually have an easier time doing it, believe it or not, or being with it.
That's cool. So one of the things you said earlier and what you're speaking to now came to mind with my ADD brain that I told you about pre-show, but what you talked about your intuition and stopping and listening to that. And then I'm thinking about all the stuff that you and I just spoke of and just being present, being okay with yourself and being focused on how to inspire that day versus live in fear. When you get that intuitive feeling or that, that just that hesitation, what's or maybe we call it a triggering event. What's a technique someone can utilize to pause and try to listen to that intuition? Because I think in the busyness of life, people need a quick exercise or a quick reminder or a trigger, maybe even if it's just like clenching of the fingers to like bring you back to, okay, I need to really listen to this.
Are you talking about if you're triggered by somebody else or if you're triggered
Well,
by a situation?
or maybe a thought that you have
Yeah.
internally.
Yeah.
Just say,
Yeah.
are there any tricks that you have that you get to like,
Yeah.
listen to that intuition?
Funny you should bring this up. So Brittany Lynn helped, she's a dear friend of mine, and she works with me on my retreats and also helped collaborate with the meditations. And she and I have always had a major conversation about trust, because trust is something that for so many of us gets broken, right? And so when I am triggered, I literally sit back and I go, okay, is this my past speaking right now? Or is this my present self? And trusting that I have what I need within myself to listen to and know the answer. Right. And so I literally will just stop. Sometimes I put my hands over my heart and just like, okay, like, what is this right now that's coming forth? And really knowing that the answer to that is within myself, and also understanding, is this my past or is this something that I can listen to right now within me? Because our past tells us stories,
Yeah.
right? And we have a tendency to go back to our past to tell us the story that really isn't even the story of the present. We just go off of the past. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. I was just thinking, do you think someone has to have done the work on their past to really understand that? Or do you think they can understand, anyone could understand that in the moment? Is this my past self talking, or is this actually happening right now and I need to pay attention to it?
Yeah, I think here's the thing, is that the more that you understand yourself and the more that you do this work on yourself, the more that you know in the moment, is this my past or is this right now?
Right.
Right? You learn to trust. So everything in life starts with self. Everything. Self-love, self-worth, self-forgiveness. I mean, literally every self-discovery, everything starts with self. Self-trust, self-belief. And so when you get to that place within yourself, my clients always laugh at me when I say this, because you just know yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And knowing thyself is a very powerful thing, and taking care of thyself is a very powerful thing.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that from my dad, and I'm so thankful that I did. And at times growing up, I thought it was very selfish of him.
Oh, nope.
But yep, right. So I did learn growing up now, as I came into my formative, like a young adult years, and as he spoke to it and explained to it more, that, and certain things he did were not healthy to take care of himself, but they were an effort to take care of himself. Because if you got to take care of number one first, to be healthy yourself, to be able to take care of your kids or any other loved person in your immediate sphere of influence. So most time people think of, well, if I go work out today, like I had to get my wife off this, and she's such a mama bear like you, that it took me 2 years to convince her, raising 4 kids, to get a part-time nanny for just 2 hours a day so she could run to Target by herself and go work out.
Oh, I love you.
Right. But it took me 2 years.
You're amazing.
It took me 2 years. Oh, and I'm not perfect by any means. But like that's what, and now she would not trade that for the world, because It's become part of her routine to be able to go to Target without dragging babies around, or be able to go work out and work on herself, and then come home and be a better mom. Right?
Isn't that fascinating? Isn't that fascinating that we as a society choose to take on more than we can, which ultimately only hurts the people closest to us, instead of asking for help and receiving, but then also understanding that through that, your kids are receiving too.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating to me.
And it's so like the stupid societal pressures that are
That's
on
what I'm saying.
all of us, but especially women. And it's like she, and not me, not her parents, not her sister, not her best friends ever had this expectation on her. But she had the expectation that she was failing as a mom, or she was handing off her responsibilities as a mom to take those 2 hours to herself per day.
Right. Right.
It's like, you're right. And then when you look at that from the outside, you're like, well, that's dumb. But
Right.
those are real feelings too, right?
Well, and I've had a lot of people say to me, like, how can you take this much time away? I was on a trail for 22 days, right? Like just in August, September. And I sit down with my kids and I explain to them, look, like I need this for me because I've been through a lot, but regardless if I hadn't even been through a lot, like I want to become the best person that I can be. And if this is my space of learning more deeply about myself so that I can then be there for you in a more deep way, amazing. And so you learn to support one another and your family too. And it gives them the opportunity, truly, it gives your kids the opportunity to support you in a different way.
That's awesome. So I want to be respectful of your time. So I know we just talked about an actionable tip, but is there one actionable tip that you just want the world to know that would help people either work through trauma or live a better life?
One actionable tip. I did mention the one. I will tell you, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you were living in trauma right now, belief in self that you will get through this is number one key. Belief in self. And that every step that you take takes you to that next step of recovery, which then ultimately will eventually take you to that place of the other side, where it is the life that you choose to live, not based on others' choices, but based on your own.
That's so powerful. You know what, actually, this is such a random thing that came to mind, that your mom telling you to just take that next step.
Yeah.
But I remember, did you ever either see the movie or read the book Lone Survivor?
No.
Okay, so it was about a Navy SEAL team that was in a bad firefight in Afghanistan. And they made a movie. Mark Wahlberg was the lead character in it. And after he wrote the book, he was the lone survivor. But what came to mind was he had been shot multiple times, fallen down a rocky mountain, like broken bones, broken back, like everything. And he's bleeding profusely and he can crawl. And all he could think about was crawling to the next spot. And he would look like 5 feet out.
Yeah.
And then he would look at the next spot, 5 feet. Oh, I can do that. 5 feet out. Oh, I can do that. And he just kept saying that to himself. And eventually he was rescued by some friendly villagers who took care of him until some other Americans could come rescue him.
Wow.
And so as you were saying that, just put one step in front of you. Like, you don't have to have belief that you can even overcome the situation right now, but have belief that you can put that step in front of you, and that can lead you to that ultimate victory.
Yeah, absolutely. Spirit's amazing, I gotta tell you. We as a society, I think, go so much to mindset, and I go to heart, spirit set. Like that human spirit is so powerful. And it connects us to everything and everyone. That's what's amazing.
It does. And our hearts and our guts have more neurons than our brains, and too often we're up here and not down here.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. That's why I always tell people, drop in, drop into your heart, drop into your heart, drop into your heart.
But you got to take the time to do it. And that's the problem with people.
Ooh, you got to take the time to be it.
Be it. That's right. That's great.
Time to be it. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Put this away.
Yeah. Put away your phones. Put away to go and be. Yes.
So word game I warned you about.
I love it. Bring it on.
Just for the audience. Again.
I'm from the Midwest. I love games. I'm going to do this at home for Thanksgiving, by the way.
Hey, when's the last time you played euchre?
Oh my gosh. It's been in January. I came home in January. Unfortunately, it was for my uncle's funeral. But we did get some great games of euchre in.
Do you teach anyone on the West Coast?
What's that?
Do you teach anyone on the West Coast the euchre game yet?
We do. We play every once in a while. My Midwest friends around here, we always laugh about it. We're like, because people don't know euchre out here.
No.
There's a lot of things people don't know out here that, we do back there. But I will be home for Thanksgiving, and we will be playing some really amazing euchre games that fire up my house quite well. People can hear us, and it's quite humorous.
It's competitive, is what you're saying.
I'm a very competitive family, let me tell you.
We're
still up at 2 a.m, and then we finally hit the hot tub at 2:30 in the morning because we're like, okay, now we got to get over what we just did. So
Gotta bring me
bring it down a little bit.
All right, audience, maybe first-time listeners, the word game. Well, I will ask her one word or say one word. She will give a one-word or short phrase response. The only rule we have is that she cannot repeat herself. All right, so Sarah, first word,
okay.
Happiness.
Joy.
Pain.
Ooh. Do I have a time limit on this?
No.
Good. Growth.
Life.
Death.
Death.
Life.
Control.
Release.
Freedom.
Forgiveness.
Hope.
Christian, because that's my youngest.
Faith.
Nature.
Inspire or inspiration, however you want to take it.
That would be my middle. That would be Carson. Absolutely.
Awesome. Impact.
Jacob. I mean, I know that technically he's my truth, but yes, he's made such an impact in my life. That kid has, I'm over my phrase, but yes.
You're all good.
He's my impact. Yes.
All right. So favorite book outside of your own or of all time, or most recent book you've read you want to give a shout out to?
So I always shout this book out just because I think it was such a huge one for me. The Body Keeps the Score. You guys, if you haven't read it, Bessel van der Kolk, go read it. It's really, really good. Anything about somatic healing, it's taught me a lot.
I wrote that down while you mentioned it, because that's not one I actually have ever heard of. And
yeah, really
Chad and I were talking about our mutual affection for Dr. Joe Dispenza and some of the work he's done. So
he's good too.
that is something I'm interested in. So that's good.
Yeah.
So remind the audience again about your book.
So my book is Walk Through This, Harness the Healing Power of Nature and Travel the Road to Forgiveness. I'm actually coming back over Thanksgiving, and I'm going to go in. I already talked to the guys at Barnes & Noble on the west side, and I'll be signing some books there and leaving them there for people to come and grab. And also hopefully the one in Milwaukee as well, in Wauwatosa, because I worked there for a long time. So cool. Yeah, it's out now. You can get it at Barnes & Noble, Target, Amazon. It's out. So, well, it will be when this, I think, comes, because
next
on the 10th. Comes out on the 10th. Yeah.
Let's go and let Chad know when you're going to be at Barnes & Noble. We'll shout it out here at the office.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Thank you. For sure. Yeah. And yeah, absolutely.
How can the audience follow you, get in touch with you if they want to hire you, all that different jazz? What mediums do you want us to follow?
There's so many, besides being on the trail or just, sending me
on the paddleboard.
On the paddleboard. Send me a bird. You can find me at sarahschulting-kranz.com. I'm also on Instagram at Sara Schulting-Kranz, Facebook, Sara Schulting-Kranz, or on Facebook, I'm Live Boldly with Sara Schulting-Kranz. My podcast is through Live Boldly, and let's see what else. If you want to watch any of the film, we filmed down in the Grand Canyon. There were 10 of us, 10 women. And so actually the film is really cool because we've already filmed in Black Earth, and we filmed here in LA. We filmed actually right before the whole flood happened last year, which we left, and then the flood happened that afternoon. It was pretty wild. Yeah. So, and it's walkthroughthis.com. We have some more footage that we're going to be putting up as well. It's really, really powerful. So it's going to be a great film. We're in post-production right now, still looking for other, we're in the funding stage once again, but that's how documentaries run. So it's beautiful.
That's a world I know nothing about. So
neither did I until here I am.
Yeah, in the throes of it. So it's great. Well, I just want to thank you for sharing so deeply today. Your story is so impactful, and then obviously the advice and how you've grown as a human is even more impactful. So thank you so much. And to the audience, get out there and inspire and impact this week, guys.